Of course, much has been written about empires, how they rise and fall, and the Roman Empire. Of course, there's a meme recently or in the last few years that everyone, for some reason, thinks about the fall of the Roman Empire. Well, and here I am today talking about the fall of the Roman Empire, and it's always the same reason. Empires expand, empires become too powerful, power goes to empires' heads, empires think they can do anything they want. The other thing about empires is the money, right? It's the debt that they incur in trying to maintain that empire. Empires become corrupt as well. You have interest groups like the military industrial complex. You have the all other complex, the financial complex these days. They become powerful. They demand a lot of tribute to stay in power. And I think that's what's happening in Europe, and the West. And by the West, I mean the United States, Canada, Western Europe, not so much Eastern Europe, because I think they are awake to what's going on because they were part of a collapse that happened basically about 34, 35 years ago. And I would include as well, of course, Australia, New Zealand, and even Japan and South Korea, even though they are in Asia. And the Australians and New Zealanders are in Australasia. It's more the concept of the West. And of course, the leader is the United States. But I would say there's also an underlying clique that resides in the city of London and New York. So it's kind of like a financial empire as well, and has become so much more ever since 1971. And why 1971? Well, because that's when Richard Nixon suspended the convertibility of the dollar into gold, and it became much easier for the empire to use its financial clout. Of course, it didn't happen right away, but I would say right now we're still pretty much very near the apex of that power. It is waning, and that's why I think the collapse is here. But before I look at why I think we are on the verge of a collapse, and I think it could take months or maybe a year or two, but I would say that's pretty close in the scheme of things. I wanted to look at the Warsaw Pact country or communism in Eastern Europe and the Soviet Union. So in the Soviet Union, of course, you could argue that communism lasted about 73, 72 years, started in 1917, and by 1991, the Soviet Union was no more. In terms of Eastern Europe, the power of the Soviet Union and the bringing about of the Warsaw Pact countries, that began in the 1950s. The Warsaw Pact countries, which were the communist countries in Eastern Europe, they only got together. The Warsaw Pact was only created in 1955. NATO was created a lot earlier, but I would say that the Cold War, so to speak, started right after World War II in 1946 with Winston Churchill's Iron Curtain speech. Yes, he made that at Westminster College in Fulton, Missouri, and he set the stage there for dividing Europe. Of course, many people didn't want a divided Europe because the Soviets had helped the Allies defeat the Nazis, but that's how it worked. So I would say that this division of Europe lasted 45 years, 1946 to 1991. And I remember very well the collapse of the Warsaw Pact bloc, communism in Eastern Europe. And it was very unexpected for a lot of us, most of us in the West. And I think it was quite unexpected for a lot of people in those countries, even though I think just like now, a lot of people were awake to the fact that the system was really rotten from within, the communist system of central control, central planning, the finances also, the corruption. And it feels very much like what we have today in the West. So if you look at the timeline here, revolutions of 1989. So that's what they were. They weren't, of course, bloody revolutions. In some instances, they did become partly a little bit, like with Ceausescu and his wife. Look it up, Nicolae Ceausescu in Romania, what happened to him. But mostly it was just like, it just collapsed. Like the people in charge of policing and running things, they just gave up. And I think our collapse of the West is going to be slightly different, but all the symptoms are there. So it says here, revolutions of 1989, also known as the fall of communism, were a revolutionary wave of liberal democracy movements that resulted in the collapse of most Marxist-Leninist governments in the Eastern Bloc and other parts of the world. The revolutionary wave is sometimes referred to as the Autumn of Nations, a play on the term of Spring of Nations that is sometimes used to describe the revolutions of 1848 in Europe. Revolutions of 1989 were a key factor in the dissolution of the Soviet Union, one of the two global superpowers, and the abandonment of communist regimes in many parts of the world, some of which were violently overthrown. But here's the interesting part about the periphery. The earliest recorded protests to be part of the revolutions of 1989 began in Kazakhstan, then part of the Soviet Union in 1986 with student demonstrations. And the last chapter of the revolutions ended in 1996 when Ukraine abolished the Soviet political system of government, adopting a new constitution, which replaced the Soviet-era constitution. The main region of these revolutions was Central Europe, starting in Poland, with the Polish workers' mass strike movement in 1988, then the revolutionary trend in Hungary, East Germany, Bulgaria, Czechoslovakia, and Romania. So it was like a domino reaction. And Germany, of course, reunified in 1990. And then it says here the Soviet Union itself, so the United States, you could substitute that for, it itself became a multi-party semi-presidential republic from March 1990 and held its first presidential election, marking a drastic change as part of its reform program. The Soviet Union dissolved in December 1991, resulting in 7 new countries which had declared their independence from the Soviet Union over the course of the year, while the Baltic states regained their independence in September 1991, along with Ukraine, Georgia, Azerbaijan, and Armenia. So there you go. It was all like from the periphery, and then the center collapsed basically in 1991. Am I saying that's what's going to happen in terms of countries and nation states with the West? Not necessarily. I think it's more to do with the European Union, with the Euro, and we're going to cover that now. And I'm seeing some headlines here that are kind of serious and tell me that, it might not happen right away, but we are in the beginnings of. So the other day, I think it was November 29th, Germany's far-right AfD vows to part ways with the EU. Not the euro, yeah, but anyway, if they part ways with the EU, if they do a Brexit, they'll be out of the euro as well. And they want to be out of the Paris deal. What's the Paris deal? Well, it's the climate change deal. And so why is this happening? Why is the West, in my opinion, on the verge of imploding? Well, there's a few reasons why. The first one, of course, is the debt. And the second one was the 2008 crisis, but that's to do with the debt. And then we had the Southern European sovereign debt crisis, 2011, 2012. There was more debt, and the central bankers and governments have taken on the debt willingly, mainly because interest rates were quite low, and also central banks printed trillions upon trillions. And they didn't realize at the time what kind of effect that would have on their economies. And of course, the Ukraine war is another reason why. And I agree that Europe has been pushed into this by, the head of the empire, the Anglo American Empire, the Americans and the British. And why are the Americans and the British doing that? Well, because of Thucydides' trap, which I've spoken about, which is what happened to empires when they're long in the tooth and they know they're going to collapse. They try anything to stay in power, and I think they couldn't have Germany and Russia be friendly in trade, and also Russia and China. That would be the end of the Anglo American Empire, because I've spoken about this before as well. Halford Mackinder, the founding father of geopolitics in the early 1900s, said if you want to run the world, rule the world, you have to control the world island. The world island, of course, is Europe, Asia, and Africa. And if you lose control of Eurasia, you lose everything. And I think that's what the Ukraine war was about. And we, in the West, the United States, Germany, the UK, France, we've thrown so much into it politically and financially, and it's backfiring. We're seeing that this war is over, and even Zelensky now has offered the eastern provinces to Russia. Yes, he said that they'd have to give it back, but I'm sure Putin wouldn't do that. But and also now with Trump coming in, everything becomes very uncertain. And I think Trump has shown as well a little bit of traces of the Thucydides trap by threatening the BRICS countries. And that as well is another part of the puzzle. The fact that the BRICS, especially after the war started in Ukraine in 2022, and the sanctions and the freezing or stealing of Russian assets started, the BRICS accelerated their move to a new system, financial system. And there's the financial part, because I think Russia, China, and other countries, and I'm not saying their financial house is in order, but they know that the financial house of the United States and its allies are in really bad shape. And I think that's going to drive things here. And in France as well, of course, the government there is on the verge of collapse. Of course, it's a government that is doesn't even have a prime minister that is a member of parliament in France, which is a quirk of their presidential system. But I think it all could unravel. And I said on Sunday during my live stream that you should watch Survival Lily. She's a lady in Austria. She's got a very good YouTube channel, and she was talking about how the economies in Europe are just really imploding. And that, of course, has all to do with the debt. It also has a lot to do with the reaction and the sanctions that have backfired because of the Ukraine situation. and Germany is gone from being an industrial powerhouse that imported its cheap energy from Russia to becoming a basket case. And Germany, of course, is the driving force, economic force, not just in the European Union, but I would say the whole of Europe and part of the world. And just seen this here this morning, German job cuts darken mood of election campaign. Snap February poll comes as Europe's largest economy faces its toughest challenges for decades. So what could really put the cats amongst the pigeons in this election is this here, and this is one of the analysts in this article says, and I quote, "The question is whether the CDU, CSU, these are the main parties, can address this fear, or whether a large number of voters will go for the AfD, Alternative for Deutschland, or BSW." So these are what they call far right and far left. And if these two parties can form a government, that could be the end of the euro. And what does the end of the euro mean? So the euro, of course, is a combination of the old European currencies like the Austrian shilling, Belgian franc, Dutch guilder, the French franc, German mark, and the Italian lira. And on January 1st, 1999, these old legacy currencies, they were fixed at a certain rate versus the euro. And the euro actually started trading in the foreign exchange market, but the currencies were still used for daily use by people in those countries. They still had their banknotes. And it was only on January 1st, 2002 that all the old banknotes were retired. So if the euro were to collapse, and if Germany were to have a government that wanted to leave the EU, it wouldn't be just the euro that would collapse, but just the whole European Union project would collapse. And I think that would be, of course, very disruptive. But in the long term, that would be probably the best thing that could happen to Europe, because I don't think it's a good setup. And I don't think it's very representative and good to have bureaucrats in Brussels telling people what to do in parts of Europe, different parts of Europe that have different cultures, different languages, and different customs. But in terms of the euro, what would happen is that I think we'd just go back to the old legacy currencies, but the rates at which they go back are going to fluctuate massively. So it's going to be a little bit like when the Bretton Woods system collapsed in the early 70s, and then all the major currencies started floating against the dollar. And I would say the Deutschmark would still be the strongest currency. And we could see currencies like the lira in the smaller countries and the historically weak currencies really do badly. So how will people hedge against this, in my opinion? Well, back in 2011-12, people were buying German government bonds, especially the short-term bills and stuff like that, because even if the euro collapses, that debt will still be part of the German debt. And if the Deutschmark comes back, that will be a Deutschmark debt. So that's how you've got to look at it. I don't think, the euro might disappear, but you will have the old currencies coming back. So that's how I see it. But it could be very inflationary. I think it will be very inflationary. And that's where we come to the hyperinflation, and I think it would spread. And the same thing would happen in the US. And that's why I think having gold and silver is really important. And in terms of timeline, I think we're very close to this. This could be happening the next 6 months, 12 months, one and a half years. I mean, if you look back at the fall of communism, it started really in the late 80s. and by 1991, everything had gone, 3 to 4 years. So there you go. That's what I see right now. We're early today, Rudy and I. So let's quickly look at where the markets are this morning. It's 6 past 7 a.m. London time. We've got spot gold at 26.46, up $7. High's been 50, the low 34, so fairly steady. We've got silver almost back up to 31. It's up almost 40 cents, or up 1.26%. We're at 30.90. The high's been 95 and the low 45. The stock market is virtually unchanged. All the major futures or the indices and the currencies as well are fairly steady right now. WTI crude is up a third at 68.20, and the bond market is pretty steady right now as well. And I think the bond market, especially the sovereign bond market, could be a bad place to be with what's happening, because when empires fall, when political unions collapse, maybe like the EU, or are under threat, I think faith and confidence in governments go down. And I think that's why, unless the central banks step in and start printing and buying these bonds, but that would be inflationary as well. Yeah, things, I wouldn't touch these government bonds, especially in this environment of fall of empire. And I think it's going to be very interesting. And yes, the Pax Americana, Anglo American Empire, or the West, that we've had since, since the end of World War II, I think is ready to go. And it's been a gradual process, but then there's that old saying in the Hemingway novel that how do you go bankrupt? Well, gradually and then suddenly. And I think we're almost in this suddenly part. So with that, I'm going to wish you all a very good day. Take care. Bye.